Welcome back to another episode of the After Timeout podcast. Today we have awesome guest Mike Jagacki, assistant men's basketball coach at SUNY New Paltz, men's basketball, and then founder of Lockdown Defense. Coach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We're definitely excited. So we like to start every episode opening tip just to get to know you, your background, where you've been, where you're going, a little bit, maybe about your program, just so our listeners can get introduced to you and kind of have that background before we get the rest of the episode. So tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Mike Jagacki. I've been coaching for a little over 10 years now, and I've been fortunate, I think, to have a journey in basketball that's really touched on so many different levels. I started as a youth league coach, coaching fourth grade AAU, and then working my way up to really at the high school level, owning my own AAU program, going to the prep school level, and then coaching at both Division I, Division III college. So I've really been able to, I think, span a lot of different levels and have a lot of different experiences, not only from the skill sets of players, but also the expectations of programs. Trying to rebuild a losing program, trying to maintain expectations at a winning program, and having the pressure to get everyone's best game against you and have the bullseye on your back. But also, that journey has brought me across the men and women's side, which have been different experiences as well. So I like to think when I talk to coaches, I have a little bit of a good perspective, all around perspective to really, kind of empathize with what they're going through. But I would say most people probably know me outside my actual basketball journey through my work studying defense, intensely focused on defense for probably the last 13 years with lockdown defense. And that's been kind of my side hustle, my side social media platforms where I've done YouTube videos on Twitter or X breakdowns and, published some Amazon defensive books. And really, I just wanted to shine a spotlight on part of the game I thought was a little undertaught and especially undervalued social media wise. How many times you see defensive cut-ups when you're scrolling Twitter or Instagram or whatever. So I wanted to shine a spotlight on great defenders and really understand that great defenders are more than just heart and hustle. That was the old cliche I learned when I was first coaching. And I thought that was inadequate to tell a player who's, Coach, can you help me improve in defense? And, kid, you just need to try harder, show more heart. And I just, as a young coach, I didn't think that was an adequate answer. So I dove into defense, started breaking it down, trying to learn what makes great defenders great, and then how to build those skills step by step. And that's really brought me to some great opportunities to meet coaches around the world, really, and talk defense. And I've been fortunate to have some really great defensive teams throughout my coaching journey. At New Paltz here, we just finished a 2-year stretch where we won our first conference championship in program history. We, finished #1 in our conference for first time, most winningest program for the last 2 years. And, it's really been a special ride here at New Paltz, and we've been top 5% in the country in defense, and that's really been our backbone. And, I still believe defense can win, and defense can win championships. We saw that at the highest level. So that's just a little preview. I don't know where we want to go from there.
Yeah, so something we've been really hitting on kind of with a lot of our guests lately that we've gotten good feedback from our listeners is kind of the why behind why they got into coaching. And so, for you, just to start off our episode, what made you kind of want to start coaching basketball? And when you started, how did you know, like, okay, I do enjoy this. This is an experience I want to keep doing.
Yeah, that's a good question because, it's not something I talk about a lot, but I was never a great player. I was never a great high school player, and I wasn't going to go on to play college basketball at a high level. Actually, in college, I mean, in high school, I kind of lost my love for the game. I wasn't a very mentally tough enough player to handle a really demanding coach that I had the opportunity to be coached by. In retrospect, he was a very good coach, but I just learned really to dread the game instead of love the game during that stretch. And it took me some time actually to find that spark again. And when I went to college, I wasn't playing college basketball, but it became a crucial part of my life. Like, me and my roommate would go play, college basketball, intramurals, pickups, anytime we had an opportunity, before classes, in between classes, sometimes in spite of classes, after practice. And we were just on any sport, really. It wasn't just basketball, it was flag football, it was soccer. Sports was a huge part of my life, and especially basketball. And then all of a sudden, sophomore year, I tear my ACL, and I was just sidelined from a big portion of my life. Recreationally, that was all I spent my time doing. That was like my main hobby, right? And then I was stuck in a dorm room on crutches trying to rehab my ACL for 6 to 9 months. So I needed to find something to keep myself engaged. So I started studying the online skill development world, which I had never dove into, watching YouTube videos of how to get my shot better. And this was at a time when, Pro Shot was just coming on board on YouTube, and things like B-ball breakdown and pick and pop. And it was really great timing. And so I just tried to get myself better during this time that I couldn't play. And all of a sudden, my roommate came home one day and said, "Hey, I got offered to coach a fourth grade AAU team. Do you want to be my assistant?" We didn't really have an idea what we were doing, but I can tell you, as soon as that first practice hit, I was hooked. All right, I got the bug. I bought as many coaches' books as I could, read thousands of pages, and I wasn't a big reader before that, but I devoured as much information as I could, bought championship production clinics, and tried to attend all the clinics and read all the blogs and watch all the videos I could just to become a better and better coach. I think I've always been, if you look at the professions I've had outside basketball, geared towards helping others. And this was just a great combination of combining a love of basketball and a love of helping others succeed and reach their goals. And it was a no-brainer. I was hooked ever since.
All right, so let's get into your journalism background too. You know, kind of how did that help you? One, maybe initially getting into things and as a coach, marketing yourself, marketing your career, and maybe, I guess analyzing the media that you were using and all that. And maybe, working with other people, reporters, other coaches, things like that. Kind of how did that background help you mold kind of where you are today?
Yeah, I've never been asked about my journalism degree. I was a dual major actually, so I got two majors. I got a major in psychology and journalism, and I would say honestly, psychology was a bigger academic passion. I got my master's in psychology. I actually just taught a course in psychology at New Paltz this semester, spring semester. But journalism was kind of this new field to me. I was never a good English student really in high school. I had no interest of reading these fictional books of Dracula and Frankenstein. But when I got to college and I learned that there was so much reporting on like sports, I was like, oh my God, like I was reading, especially ESPN Grantland days of Bill Simmons, and finding this whole new aspect of literature that I had never really touched. And I just got hooked again, and I started seeing journalism as a major I could fit into my schedule and a way that I could bring in sports to my academic pursuits. I could cover the teams at Rutgers at the time, and especially the unknown teams like crew and lacrosse and, the women's soccer team who was crushing it. It was a great chance for me to get around sports and still, be pursuing my academic career. But I think, back to your question, when I look, I definitely use my journalism degree in like writing blog articles, and I've written books and stuff like that. But at its core, I think what it's helped me the best is distill information. In journalism, like the first thing you learn is this inverted pyramid style of writing an article, like a news article, right? And the inverted pyramid style is making sure you have, that strong lead, that strong hook, and getting the bulk of the information in there early so that if the reader stops reading midway through, they've got all the information they need. They don't need to continue reading to hear if the guy got arrested or not. They already know. Maybe they want to learn more information. They already know the team won. Maybe they want to learn how they won. But that way of communicating is very important, I think, in coaching. We need to make sure we're being effective and concise when we're coaching our athletes. I think Eastman once said, we want to coach in bullet points, not paragraphs. And I think that's journalism in its core. One of my favorite assignments I ever got as a journalism major, I think it was my first class. I don't remember the professor's name, unfortunately, but our first assignment was to synthesize movies in 6 words or less. We had to summarize a movie in 6 words or less, and then we had to do that with memoirs as well about people. And it's really a hard exercise to take a whole 2 hour plus movie and break it down into 6 words. And I think that's all what coaching is about. Like, we can't spend an hour going over the scout, even though we could as coaches. We need to boil it down to its absolute core, because that's the message we need our players to remember. And if they tune us out midway through the article, they've already gotten what they need to do, right? So same thing with installing a new offense, a new defense, anything like that. And then, yeah, communicating on social media and getting your point across, especially in today's day with attention spans maybe going down and down, being able to communicate something that you want to online you have to do it concisely. And I think journalism's been a great avenue for me to learn that.
I think every coach should take a class in how to summarize something in 6 words or less. I think it might save us all some time.
Yes, it's definitely helped my players, that they don't have to hear me ramble on and on, unless maybe I think they need it because they're winded or something. But yeah, yeah.
So we wanted to get into a little bit of time, specifically when you were the video coordinator at Hofstra and kind of just watching film. I think kind of as you said, as coaches, when we're watching film, we're watching for so many things, but maybe we all need the 6 word sometimes when we watch film. So from that specific experience, maybe what were some things you learned about putting film together, disseminating the film out, looking for specific things for your staff, communicating specific things to the players, kind of a deep dive into that film aspect?
Yeah, that's a good question again. I got an opportunity at Hofstra to join a staff entry level position. I was jumping from prep school to Division One. It's a pretty big leap at the time. And really, I would say that I I had been primed. I was a big studier of even outside of basketball, guys like Bill Belichick and a lot of football greats and kind of their model of scouting. And so that was really always gearing me up to how I wanted to scout. Unfortunately, at like the high school level at the time, like huddle wasn't a thing. So you actually had to get your boots on the ground and go out and film. And at the prep school level, sometimes you didn't even know who you were playing until the day you were playing them. So it was hard to scout. But I always wanted, to scout, like these greats that I was reading about and trying to learn from. So when I got to Hofstra, I think the biggest adjustment was just the resources I had. I had never really used Synergy before Hofstra. We had all these different programs and different video editing softwares. And then, so yeah, at first I was overwhelmed. I was creating playlists of, 400 plus clips to share with my head coach. And she loved information. I could never give her too much information. But when it came to distilling it, that was the key part, like you're saying. And so I think what I've learned most about scouting actually came towards the end of my time at Hofstra, and I wish I knew it earlier. Luckily, I've been able to apply it at New Paltz, and I think we've done really good at scouting. But yeah, distilling it to the things that will really make a difference for our program. So Will Hardy gave a clinic once, and I think at the end he was asked about scouting, and it was just like a 30-second answer, but it completely changed the way I thought about it. He said, when we scout, we're not looking to hold the team to zero or take away all these different other things. And he said, really, most games are decided by 7 or 8 points. If you look at the scoring margins, you think if we were just 7 points better, how many more games would we have won last year? You'd be surprised, And if you were 7 points worse, you would also be surprised. But so when I go to scouting, that's really what I want to get to. Like, what are the 7 to 8 points that we could take away? And so the first time I think it really clicked for me at Hofstra when we were playing a team we had no business being in competition with. And the first thing I needed to look for was just how can we take away their easy layups? That's all I wanted to look at the first time I went through the film. How are they getting easy layups? Because I really believe the team that gets the most easy layups has the best chance of winning, right? Like easy points are hard to come by. So if you have some great backdoor sets, you're getting out in transition, leaking out in certain ways, we need to make sure that maybe we can get some easy buckets based on our scouting and our offensive sets, but defensively, we can't give you any easy baskets, and that's going to put us in a good position to win. That margin's going to shift to our side, hopefully. So that was number one. Like when I'm scouting, how can we take away their easy baskets? How are they getting easy baskets? And then I want to dive into personnel. And maybe I'm going on a tangent here, but I want to dive into personnel because I also want to see like what are the 2 to 3 buckets that we can maybe take away, especially from their leading scorers, right? So I was I'm really a film freak, I guess, but I watch every single basket that, their top 2 scorers make in the whole year. And if it's early in the season, I watch last year's too. And it doesn't take as long as maybe you think, but you watch every basket they've ever scored, and it's like watching a glorified highlight tape because you never see them miss, but you start to develop trends and patterns of, where are they getting their easy buckets? What's their go-to moves, things like that. And it's not that I'm trying to, this person loves to do a between the legs move. This person loves to, listing out all these different strengths and weaknesses. I'm just trying to identify where are the 7 to 8 points we can take away. So if there's one or two baskets we can limit their best player from getting that they usually do, well, now we can lower their points per game, 4 points maybe. And then if we could do that to another player, we're already at 8 points. And then if we can do it to one of their sets, well, maybe then we've taken away another 2 point. So now you start to the steamroll kind of an advantage going into that game without, this is the key part, overwhelming your players, right? We're not trying to take away every single thing. So when I watch film, it's really geared toward checking off different points of emphasis for me. And those aren't all the points of emphasis, but that's really what was honed at Hofstra when I was watching all that film and helping the coaches scout and prepare for games and also scout ourselves.
All right. So we want to give you a chance to talk about your your book now, right? Lockdown Defense. Great book. I'm sitting here looking at it right now. And I think I was drawn to it because when I was more baseball guy, but in high school I was a defensive like pest. That was my role, right? Go guard this guy and get after it. And at the time you don't really think about some of those things, right? Like you said, it was like, hey, play hard,
Yeah.
with effort, which definitely is a big part of it, right? But there's more to it and more technique, and I think you do a tremendous job of on your Twitter account and in your book of saying, hey, these are the certain specific aspects. But so maybe first of all, just tell us where we can find it. Tell us all that good stuff, so you can get a little pub here, and then I'll go into the next part.
Yeah, I like this. A nice little plug. Yeah, I've written 2 books on Amazon. I actually wrote the first one, Lockdown Defense, Developing Elite Defenders During COVID. Division I schedule is tough to find time to do these kind of things, but COVID was a secret blessing for me. I was able to do a bunch of online clinics, and then with the feedback I was getting from other coaches, I was like, man, I love reading these coaches' books. Maybe I have something that could help other coaches, especially the way I developed as a young coach reading these books. So I tried to put all the clinic talks I was given into a book, all the YouTube videos I've broken down for over 10 years into a book. And, I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. I really think defense has been stuck in the two-handed push shot era. We still kind of hear the same teaching principles, the same stances, the same drills that we've done back then. And we've seen the game transform. We've seen shooting erupt. We've seen ball handling, mixtapes go to places we never imagined. And yet, when we look back at the film, individual defense really hasn't changed at all. Like the same teaching points are the same teaching points from like 60 years ago. And so I really thought defense needed a revolution. And with all the things I was breaking down, I thought if I could just condense it into a book, it would help me and help other coaches. So that's what I spent time doing. And, that book, there's a follow-up book called The Lockdown Program, which is, coach, I had a small little drill section at the back of Lockdown Defense, and coaches were like, what's this drill? Like, are there other drills? And so I was like, I'm just going to make a whole book about drills and progressions and how to take a player from maybe liable to capable. And then if you have a capable player, how to take them from capable to elite and elite to lockdown. So there's different levels definitely into individual defensive development. And I just wanted to lay that all out, both from a technique and movement skill, which was the first book, and then from the drills and progressions in the second book.
So you kind of answered a little bit of the next questions, but I want to talk about like some of the greatest challenges of writing it. Like when you were writing it, with your thought process, right? Like maybe the synthesizing part, like putting all your ideas that you have, because you put out great stuff everywhere on defense, a lot of stuff that people don't necessarily think about or see. So maybe what were some of the challenges when you were writing kind of both books to get the message you wanted out there in a concise manner?
I would say the hardest thing about writing the book was I didn't have video playing alongside it to break down like I did in clinics, or a demo player. That was the hardest thing. I mean, I got 2 of my former players in a church gym and taking pictures of them so that I could have some reference for the book. And then, if you have the book, you probably know there's like a video element to it too that you can access. But I thought the hardest thing was learning how to talk about the body movement and like the stance and the sliding. And that was the hardest thing to really learn how to talk. And I was constantly writing it and like sending it to a friend, like, does this make any sense? Like, can you visualize what I'm talking about here? And I even hired an editor to help me out, and that was the hardest part. But I think if I go all the way back to when I started Lockdown Defense, when I first published my first YouTube video, I don't know, 13 years ago today, not today exactly, but that would be cool. But the reason I shared that video was because not because like, oh, look what I found. That wasn't what I was trying to do. I was finding these little nuances and techniques that by analyzing great defenders, and I wasn't sure, like, I've never heard this stuff talked about or taught. Like, am I just crazy? Like, are these just freak athletes doing freak athlete things and I'm trying to teach a fourth grader, like, so I started to break it down and share it on YouTube, and the production value was extremely low. Terrible voiceovers with static slow motion videos and stuff, but I wanted to share that just to get feedback. Honestly, I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy and finding things that other coaches would be like, no, why would you ever? But instead, the feedback on YouTube were like, wow, this is great. And, it was really supportive, besides maybe some people knocking the production quality of the videos. But that gave me the confidence to continue doing it and then experimenting with different ways to help defender, and it's tough to, you find a concept that you've never heard talked about. And now you're like, well, how am I going to teach it? So there was definitely an experimental phase to it. And that's really what the book and the program and now the online academy is I want to help coaches get past all that experimental stage that took me 10 years to find out the actual drills and progressions and teaching cues that actually helped players progress defensively, and you don't have to go through all the experimental phase that I did trying to figure out the best way to teach these skills and techniques.
All right, so kind of the halfway point, and then we're gonna switch here and really get into some defensive stuff. But let's halftime adjustments. I want to talk with you about, especially in your book, you talk about the stance a lot, right? Upward stance, forward stance. And like you said, I feel like that there was just one way. Like you're going to sit down, you're going to get in a stance, and that's how you do it, right? For so many years, that's what your coaches taught you. So could you go into a little bit more on your thinking and your studies on different players and stances, and maybe how to translate that into your own players, and figuring out what's best for them?
Yeah, I think there are different levels of defense and there's different styles of it. In shooting, we kind of see the same kind of technique, but in ball handling, we see a lot of different moves and a lot of different things. You need a lot of different tools to, work in different situations that the defenders give you when, especially on the offensive end. And defense, we have the same kind of thing. Like, not all players are going to be able to pressure in your shirt pressure, especially at the beginning of their development. And some players aren't going to be as effective in containment style defense. But what I found breaking down great defenders is that they weren't just sitting down like every book that I read and every, picture that I saw online in a clinic. They were doing some different things with their body. So I saw some players like Michael Jordan, Patrick Beverly, Avery Bradley, some of the pressure defenders at the time that were really effective. Gary Payton at times as well. Kevin Garnett even. I could just continue listening, but let's go in. They really, their stance wasn't sitting down on an imaginary chair, getting their shoulders and knees and toes aligned. No, not at all. Like the antithesis of what they were doing with their body. Instead, they looked like a cornerback in football pre-snap, like ready to jam the wide receiver as they're coming into their route. Instead, they're leaning with the hip. They're rotating their hips forward and their shoulders forward, and they're really leading with that. And it puts all the momentum on their forefoot, which allows them to be explosive. It allows them to extend their reach into the dribble pocket, and allows them to really assert a level of disruptive control by being that close. And if you think about it, like when you're rotating at the hips and moving your shoulders maybe in the forefront of your stance, you're actually feel a lot closer to the offensive player than your feet actually are. So it's a way to maybe fake pressure, although there is definitely a lot of pressure when those guys are defending you. I just tweeted out a video of Dyson Daniels pressuring the ball. Like, there's a lot more pressure you feel, even though your feet are pretty far back, just like you would be. So it's a great stance for pressure defenders, a great stance for really athletic players. Do you need to be Michael Jordan? Do you need to be Patrick Beverly style athleticism? No, but it is kind of, you need to be a more athletic player at your level to use that kind of stance, right? So if you have a great athlete in your program that you think could be unlocked more defensively, that stance is probably just the first step, right? And then you got to obviously build the tactics and the techniques and the mindset into what makes a great pressure defender. But not everyone's going to be that athlete at their level. And so how do we make sure that they're not a liability on defense? Because that's the worst thing you could be, right? You're constantly getting blown by or shot over. Like, that's no help. It's going to be hard to find minutes. So how can we make that defender capable? Well, that's more of a containment style defense. It doesn't mean that they're bad defenders. There have been some great containment defenders. Some of my favorites, Scottie Pippen, right? Kawhi Leonard. Those guys you think as defensive menaces, but their stance is more like a player defending in soccer, right? They're not getting super low to the ground. They're not sitting in an imaginary chair. they're more so staying in like recovery mode, right? Just like a soccer player trying to stay in front of a ball, like they're not getting low in a stance in a crouch crab position, right? They're staying in recovery mode. They're able to keep that person in front using angles and using their chest and using their body. And so that's more of an upward stance. So that's a containment level defender. And again, that doesn't mean you can't pressure the guy, right? We see great defenders all the time use their chest to cut off attacks. Lou Dort, one of the ones that comes to mind right away. Like he's an upward stance guy, but as soon as you drive, like you're hitting his chest, and he's able to do that because he's using angles and his obviously his athleticism too, and his reaction and anticipation skills. But I think there are really two stances: that forward stance, which is going to allow you to pressure the ball a little bit more, and that upward stance, which is going to allow you to use your body and angles a little bit more. And every defender, I think, is going to be maximized by different stances. But it's about finding the one that fits them and then building the skills within that kind of architect of a defender.
So this leads perfectly, that led perfectly. Well done, Todd, with the halftime adjustment question there into the second half of the show, which is just basically talking about defense and creating, a quote unquote lockdown defense for your team. So let's start really, really small. So you have an individual player. Let's start really even specific. So maybe it's a incoming freshman into your high school program or an incoming freshman into your collegiate program, and they're above average athleticism. So to give you a little bit more to play with, where are you starting with that person? What are you starting with to build them? What things are you looking for? What things are you maybe looking for that they had in habits that you're looking to adjust? Let's just start with that base individual defender.
Yeah, so I think most of the time I don't get the opportunity to work with maybe a player just one on one unless they are really an issue defensively. Then we're pulling that player, or they want to keep working and they want to go from elite to lockdown. But most of the time when the season starts and we're just trying to lay that strong foundation for incoming freshmen or even guys returning, we just need to set the standard again at level one. Like, what is it going to take to make sure that we have no liabilities out there? And I believe this is a quick tangent, then I'll get back to, I promise, to the question. I spent so much time as a young coach focused on our shell drill, our rotations, our scrambles, and we still do that. That's still an important part. But the more time I spent on developing the individual defenders, the less time we were actually in those situations in games, right? So like you're constantly worried about who's our help guy, where's our rotation, where's our X out guy, how are we scrambling? We're not talking enough in our the more time we developed the individual defender, the less we were in those moments as a team. Just like imagine, you're putting in a bunch of plays to get threes, but you're never practicing shooting. Like it's the same thing. You don't have any shooters, then so we want to have great individual defenders because that's going to set the ceiling really and the floor for our team defense. So let me get back to where I was. So guys are coming in. We want to establish level one defense, right? So level one defense is making sure we're not giving up any straight line drives. We're able to guard our yard. And so for that, that's a containment. I want everyone to be able to be a containment defenders, have that upward stance and to be able to cut off, 3 yards to the right, 3 yards to the left with their chest, showing their hands without fouling. And we want to build that package because listen, even the most athletic players that maybe you're coaching on your team, they might not be able to assert that same level of pressure against the best player in your conference, right? So they might need to switch up their bag too. They might go against the guy like we saw Nemhard, even though the Pacers lost, but we saw Nemhard in game one really try and pressure SGA the same way they were pressuring Brunson and Mitchell and those guys that they played before because, they were a great point of attack defense. But SGA started that game on fire, right? Getting to the foul line. I think he had 10 points in the first quarter. And Nemhard switched his defense completely at the end of game one to a much more containment style defense, right? He was just trying to cut SGA off with his chest, meet him there, force him into tough shots, not foul him. And that really allowed them to steal game one, I believe, if my memory is correct, at the end there when SGA was trying to win it all in game one. Same thing, like we need all our players to have at least that defensive option in their bag. And so we work on that. We work, on our ability to cushion slide. That's kind of the first skill that we teach in the upward stance, your ability to move not only backwards, but laterally. A lot of people that work on sliding only work on it east to west. But in a game, like, you're not going to be able to just move east and west, because that's usually going to be a blocking foul when you're trying to move laterally and a guy's trying to drive into you. Unless you clearly beat them to the spot, it's going to be a foul on the defender. So we need to be able to move both backwards and laterally at 45-degree angles almost, so that we can maintain our legal guarding position. And that gives us the ability then, if we do catch the drive, to use our physicality, because we are in legal guarding position, to stand them up with our chest, show our hands. We call it scarecrowing. So that's really level one, right? Making sure that drives are wide, making sure that you can catch them with your chest. We work a lot on ball charges. We lead our I think my teams have always been great at taking on-ball charges, like Scottie Pippen used to be, and you see guys like Padinsky now in the NBA. So that's kind of like the first technique. The cushion slide and charges are really the first skill that maybe you can take your cushion slide and make it like a turnover possibility, because I don't want guys to be reaching for steals, especially at level one defense. Like, just like we don't want all our offensive players taking heat checks, right? Like, we don't need our defenders reaching if they're not capable of getting steals or even defending their man. So that's level one. And then along with level one, we also need to make sure we're not passive defenders just waiting to be attacked. I think that's the worst. A lot of players, they're getting ready to contain this guy and their hands are down, they're given a cushion. It's like, that is not what we want. Like, you're just waiting to be attacked. Because a good offensive player, he can shift to the right and now he's got you sliding, then he can use your momentum. He's created a bigger gap back to the left. So like, your passiveness is actually making it harder for you to defend. So along with level one, we need to allow our guys to also impact the ball. And that comes with heat. We call it heat. That's just our way of kind of being active on the ball, whether it's a live dribble and we have to stunt in and stunt out, just to make that ball handler feel a little bit of pressure, even if it's completely fake. We also work a lot on tracing the ball, because we want to get deflections. We want to make sure that there are no comfy quarterbacks going against our defense. We do not want the guy with the ball to feel like a quarterback with a clean pocket, because any quarterback, even bad ones, can look good there. And so if their hands are down on defense and that guy with the ball is just going to be able to throw a great backdoor pass on time, on target, guy coming off a screen on time, on target, it's going to make everything harder for us behind the ball. So we need great impact on the ball, whether it's fake or real pressure, usually fake in the beginning, and we need an ability to cushion slide. And the last step, and I'll try and wrap up, but the last step to this level one kind of defense is an ability to contest, especially around the rim baskets. Because if we're containing at level one, well, if the offense keeps taking what we're giving, we might be able to catch them with their chest and stand them up, but eventually they will get to the basket against a containment defender, unless you can get a charge on them. So we need to have great wall ups, and that's kind of like the last cherry on top of level one. You need to be able to force really hard layups, really hard contested around the rim finishes without fouling, because fouling is, quick tangent again. A lot of coaches, I think, demonize fouling too much. If you look at the stats, there's no correlation between teams that foul and teams that are bad at defense. It's actually sometimes the opposite. Where we watched the Warriors have that magical dynasty run, they were in the top 5 of fouling every year when they were a top 5 defense. Same thing with the Houston men's basketball program this year. Same thing. Every time you look, OKC, great example. They foul all the time. Sometimes they get away with it, yeah, and people get angry. But fouls, especially on the perimeter, I can live with. But fouls around the basket, unexcusable to me. So great walling up is the kind of like the last cherry, and how to teach that and stuff like that. Yeah.
I do have a quick follow-up, Todd, if that's okay.
No, that's I think we probably go a lot of follow-ups, but
Yeah.
that was a great answer.
I want to follow up specifically on the walling up, because it's something that every coach teaches, but then I think sometimes when coaches teach it, almost sometimes the wall up is too passive and there's too much space on the wall up, or the wall up is too late and the person's able to finish, and then the player looks at the coach and they're like, "Well, I walled up." Well, that's great, but you were so flat and so passive that the person just did a little baby hook over you. So with the walling up specifically, what are the key teaching points?
When I first got the new Pulse 3 years ago, that was one of the things that needed the biggest adjustment. Like, our walling up, we were there, but we weren't making an impact, right? Like, just like you were saying, like, "Coach, I walled up." No, that used to get under my skin the biggest. And in year 2, that was like my mission, right? Like, we were going to be a better wall up team, and I'll get into it. But if you look at 3 years ago to 2 years ago, New Paul's finishing percentage around the rim and synergy, like it takes a dramatic shift down just because we were walling up a lot better. So when we talk about walling up, you're exactly right. Like it's not a passive thing. Now, a lot of players think, well, I don't want to get a foul, coach. Listen, most of the fouls that are going to come with walling up or around the rim are going to be collisions, right? They're going to be when there's separation and then you try and at the last second create contact, or the offensive player creates contact, unfortunately, and they get the foul. Either way, it's going to be the collisions. But when you can stay attached and steer the offensive player away from the basket, fouling with your lower body, but maintaining legal, at least appeal with your upper body, showing your hands and throwing your chest into their shoulder or chest. But if you're fouling and driving out with the lower body, that's rarely called. And as long as you're maintaining that contact and showing the refs your hand and driving them out, usually you can get away with it. And now you're forcing shots that are fading away. If there's any separation between the defender and the offensive player, that is not a wall up to us. If there is a time when the defender ends the wall up under the basket, that is not a wall up. Right? We show film all the time of soft walls versus strong walls. And there's a huge difference. I even tweeted out one time. Maybe I'll have to tweet it out again soon. But there's a huge difference between a soft wall and a strong wall. And the last thing I'll say is we teach maybe walling up. We teach a lot of walling up on live dribbles, live finishes, but also coming to two. A lot of players make the mistake of walling up the ball, like going for like we're not trying to block the shot at all. So when that player comes to two and gives you a pump fake or whatever, or fakes it, and they wall up, try and go for the ball, well, now the step through is wide open. So we're not trying to block the shot. We're just trying to get to the body, stay body to body, force that guy. If he's going to finish, it's going to be through us or away from us. And it's been very successful for us. I don't know if that was enough teaching tips for you. I maybe can find some other things we could walk through it more. But there's some great drills we do, whether it's individual drills, in small groups, or whether it's whole team stuff to get the energy flowing. But yeah, walling up.
So before we kind of go into the team defense, you said something that I was thinking in my mind as you're talking, especially in the post, right? The timing of the wall up, right?
Mhm.
I know I talk to our post players a lot that they'll just wall up, but it gives the player, they can do whatever they want, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe like just one or two key points on the timing of it. Like, what are you looking for when the offensive player does this? That's the
Yeah.
timing to wall up. Because I feel like you said, oh, I walled up, but no, you didn't. You just stood there and let them do whatever they want.
Yeah, I think you have unearthed another trigger. Like the guy's guarding the post and he just starts putting his hands up and walling up while the guy still has a live dribble. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, it looked like a Statue of Liberty over there with two hands up. Like, he's just going to seal you and drop step you. I don't think the wall up really starts until they gather the ball. So if that post player still has, like, you need to be in post defense, right? You need to be down low, getting ready to defend those dribbles and take away those different spin moves and drop steps and stuff like that. Once they gather the ball, then it might be about getting contact, getting body to body. You can't overdo the body to body. I know we're talking about physicality, but in the post, you got guys with great footwork, hopefully. And if you kind of overdo your physicality, they can just use it against you. So I think there's a delicate balance between walling up with physicality and walling up too much that your momentum is taking you in the wrong way. You just want to be a strong wall, right? You want to be a brick wall. A brick wall is not leaning over and getting ready to break if the support is taken away. So we need strong walls. I like to wall up the shoulder, especially of the post player, because now even when they're spin, now we're on their back, now they're on their other shoulder. You have to be active. You have to have act. Just like when we contest, like we don't want to leave our stance when we contest. We don't want to leave our stance when we wall up either. A lot of players make that mistake. That's the first thing I thought about when I was thinking about your visual of a guy just standing straight up with his hands up and the guy still got a live dribble. But even when he does pick it up, like we need to have active feet. Same thing in a closeout. We need to be ready to move on our feet. We're not getting out of our stance. In a wall up, we're not getting out of our stance. We're just staying shoulder to shoulder, body to body with our hands up, being ready to move. And the same thing in help. We're not coming over to help to be a statue so that we can just get euroed or moved around. Like, we need to come over to help to present a big body, but also be agile enough that we know the play is not over.
We're flowing now, John. Let us right into team defense. You talked about help. Let us right in there. So, okay, now we got that baseline, right? You got that level one, as you called it. And now we got to translate that into the whole group. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what are some of the vital defensive traits? And then I'll do one more follow-up after that.
Yeah, so team defense, I'm going to go more abstract, although we've talked a lot about technique and I've hated on the effort and heart stuff. But I think if I'm going to maybe do some coach speak here, I think the three like important traits, quote unquote, of a great team defense to me and the style that I like to coach, that I've been most effective coaching, is we need smart players, we need tough players, and then with that, usually you have vocal players. It's really hard to find smart, tough players that aren't vocal. But you're not always gifted to have smart players, unfortunately. Especially at the high school level, you're sometimes building the AIQ as they come up with you. But if you have smart players and tough players, man, you can do a lot. You can try a lot, you can do a lot. But if you don't have smart players, then you have to, be a little bit more creative. And hopefully, if you don't have a smart player, they have something else, right? They have super raw athleticism or a lot of skills that maybe just need a little bit more refinement. So maybe you have to use that guy as a disruptive point of attack. Maybe you have to use him as a handcuffed on a key player so that you can leave your smart guys to play team defense. But I think that's important. Being vocal, communicating, I think that's too much of a cliche, although it's super important to me. I don't want guys just yelling that they're in the gap or I got ball, I got ball, I got ball. Like, good. Like maybe you need to break guys out of their shell sometimes with that kind of stuff, but we need to have actionable communication, right? I'm on your left, I'm on your left, I'm on your right, I'm helping. You need to know, what do you see? What are you doing? Where are you? Like those are important things to communicate. I like to celebrate wins. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent again, but I'm just flowing in here. I listened to a Belichick quote as he was in the locker room or doing a film study. And if you think of Bill Belichick, like you're thinking of the most undescript guy. He doesn't even react when his team scores a touchdown. He's the model of, Zen, I guess, or maybe the opposite of Zen. I don't know, doom and gloom, but he's never reacting. And you would think he wants his players to do the same. Like he wants his players to be stoic. It's not the case at all. Like this was a great insight, this clip, where he's talking to his teams. Like when you make a play, like that is all the work you've ever put into the sport finally being on display. Like, of course, you want to celebrate it with your teammates. So, like, when we take a great charge, we want some excitement. Like, we force a great turnover. We need to celebrate the wins. Even in practice, we get a stop and we're in a brutal defensive segment. You get a stop. You need to celebrate that with your team because that's where the momentum comes from. So, vocal isn't always about just communicating where you are, but it's also about sharing the excitement of defense with your team because that really builds a great culture. And then so once you have maybe the core principles of tough, smart, and vocal, well, now we need to make sure it's in a great scheme and system. And so we have maybe the pieces of great individual defenders or developing individual defenders, level one. We need to figure out the scheme that's going to help them succeed. Just like on offense, we spend so much time, what play should we run? Which play should we run for this player, that player? What kind of system, motion offense should we run? And maybe you have a system that you have as a coach already. Like I'm always a Princeton offense team, not me specifically, but this is someone else. But you have to tweak it to your system, your personnel, right? Like your motion offense, although it's the same one from year to year, might look a little or completely different, even though it has the same principles based on your personnel. And the same thing with defense. Like we need to figure out what's going to put our players in best position to succeed, and that comes with a great scheme and system. Now, a lot of coaches think, uh, creating a defensive scheme or system is all about putting coverages together. To me, that can get you in a lot of trouble. If you're just thinking, what's the best way to guard a stagger screen? What's the best way to guard screen the screener and, cross screen, down screen? What's the best way to guard side pick and roll? What's the best way to guard Spain pick and roll? On and on and on. But if you're just thinking about what's the best coverage in isolation, you're getting the picture wrong because sometimes, you might think the best way to guard a cross screen, down screen is this, but your system is a no middle system on the ball and you're maybe denying the gaps. And now the way you're guarding the cross screen is actually going to put your players in poor position to be in synergy with the guy guarding the ball and the guys guarding the off ball. And now the way that you shoot the gap or you chase the stagger screen is not going to be in any way for your players to arrive to take away middle on the catch to maybe a down screen or something like that. So you always need to think, what's the scheme? So I remember Dick Bennett, Tony Bennett, Virginia, one of my favorite teams to study. His father was, the guy who kind of pioneered the pack line. The pack line came out of his one decision to guard the post. Like all he wanted to do was guard the post 3/4 high side. That's all he wanted to do. And that one decision extrapolated to everything else he needed to do. So if he's guarding the top side of the post, well, how does he need to guard on the ball? Well, if he's guarding strong no middle, then that player is just going to be always able to enter the ball baseline side to the post player without any impact, because we're taking away middle and we're taking away high side. So the baseline feed is always going to be there. So what does he think? Well, we got to take away baseline. And even though that's not really ever been done before, we're going to sit on the baseline side. So now those baseline post entry passes aren't there. But now that middle penetration is there. So where do we need to be in the gaps? Well, now we need to be plugging the gaps to take away paint penetration. And if we're in the gaps, well, now we can limit penetration and we can get back to our man to take away baseline. And because if we're on the line, up the line, and the ball goes to our man, there's no way we can take away base. So it all kind of flows together. And I think we as coaches need to put the onus on ourselves first when we're creating a great team defense. Yet, yes, they need characteristics. And yes, we need to train that. And yes, we need to train the individual defenders. But we also have a really high responsibility as the defensive coach to make sure our system and scheme is always putting our players in position to succeed. Because I'm a big believer that even great players have a hard time overcoming poor coaching. And I never want to be in the way of my players and their chance to succeed, especially on defense.
So I want to, before we move on to the next one, I do have a follow on that, and it's about communication, and it's actually a personal pet peeve of mine. And I saw it when I went to an AAU tournament a couple weeks ago, and the coach is just yelling, they're just yelling, talk, talk, talk. What does that actually mean? Like she's not telling them what to say, where to go. They're just yelling, talk, talk, talk.
Yeah.
So how do you, with your players, kind of develop some of that? You kind of talked about it, but I want to go a little bit deeper, like that intentional talk and promote, especially maybe for some quieter guys. How do you kind of promote that intentional communication? And to be honest, that intentional listening when your teammates
Yes.
are communicating.
Yeah, so I think this is a question that covers a lot of topics. Luckily, in our program, we haven't had really the super shy person that I've had, all the time in youth AU and high school, that you'd have to break out of their shell. That, I think, is the first challenge. And I deal with it a lot when I do private team camps for programs that I come, and coaches will be like, oh, they just don't talk. And like, what do you want them, like you said, like the girls or whatever the team you were watching, they should have just started talking about their favorite show. Like maybe that would make the coach happy. They would be talking. But yeah, so I think the first thing is you got to break the players out of their shell. And sometimes that's not because they're super shy. Sometimes it's just because they're uncertain about what great communication sounds like and what they should be saying. So to me, you have to first define what are the things we can be saying. And for me, that's where you are, what you're doing, and what you see, right? So the kind of the W's, I guess, of communication. And then if all else fails, you can also hype up your teammate. Hey, you got, like, I don't know, I love that kind of stuff. Like, hey, you got him, So those are the first things. Like just giving them a really clear and concise things of what they can say, right? Where you are, what you see, what you're doing, like what's your responsibility. Sometimes that's enough. Like they just need clear guidance to make sure that when they do talk and open their mouth, they're not going to be made fun of for like, oh, why did you say that? Like, no, that's not going to happen here. All right. These are the things you can say. If they do have a fear of, I don't know, what their people, they just are super shy, maybe that's tough. For me, we do show a cut up that I have of great defenders communicating. And I think it's a great way to kind of shift some players' perspective, especially in camp formats that I do, where, what does a great defender look like and sound like? And, they list it all out and they watch the clips and they see it. And so like, that's what a great defender looks like. And what do you feel watching that defender? Like you feel admiration for them. You feel like they're great. You feel all these things that are positive towards that player. And you're like, why wouldn't you want other people to think that when they watch you? Like, what do you think when a player isn't talking and doing all that stuff? And then they start to see like, oh snap, I don't want to be that kind of I'm afraid of maybe what people will think when I'm not when I say something. But we've shifted now the whole paradigm on them, where now it's like actually not commuting is more embarrassing, right? When I don't communicate, now people think less of me as a player. Maybe they think I'm too shy, maybe they think I'm too timid, and I don't want to be seen that way. So I've shifted the paradigm for them that really not communicating is more embarrassing, and communicating makes you fit in more and makes you more comfortable. So that's kind of stage one, breaking them out of their shell, giving them a clear, concise way of communicating. And then, yeah, as we drill like our shell drill and all that stuff, I am telling the guys what they should be saying. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, Coach. I love a team that talks. I do. But I also love a team that can hear me. I don't, yeah, sometimes we do the whole like defense thing on the bench and stuff. But, key moment, the other team's calling out a play. Like, I want to be able to communicate to my guys too. And if our bench is going crazy yelling defense, defense, then sometimes I can't communicate to our guys so that they can hear us, especially if the gym is packed. So I do like to, that active listening. Like sometimes there's too much chatter and, there doesn't need to be all that chatter. Like I rather the team hear whether the captain's talking because they're calling out a set that they're running or he's calling a screen, is it more important that he hears that I'm in help, I got ball, or is it more important that he hears screen coming to your right? Like that's a lot more important. So we don't want too much chatter. On shell drill, sometimes it's useful just to talk about positioning because communication helps you keep up with the play. But once the game comes, like things that I'm going to lose my mind on is when communication is the action, when it's what they see instead of necessarily where they are and what they're doing. It's really what they see. That's the thing that I'm going to draw a firm line in the sand that we need to be communicating that, and that's not a negotiable.
So I want to get into things that maybe hold defenses back. So, we're building up to this, trying to be an elite defense, but maybe what are some of the things that coaches are doing, whether it's in their system or in their adjustments or whatever, that makes the defenses struggle?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing, I mean, this is going to be a little review of what we talked about, but the first thing that really holds the defense back is usually individual talent, right? Like if you have one or two players that are constantly getting blown by, like that's not a scheme issue. That's an individual issue that you need to solve. You need to pull those players to the side, just like you would a player who's really struggling with an offensive skill or a set. You need to pull that player aside and develop their level one defense. That's number one. Like if you have players that you don't feel like you can play and trust on defense, you need to fix that and address that right away. Develop their level one defense because that's really going to hold your whole team back. Like even great defenders, but they're going to constantly be worried about their worst defenders and how they're going to lose the play for them. And now they can't defend the other team's best player the way they should because they got to be in help. Or if they are taking away the best player, now the third, fourth option's going off, and that's not good either. So the first thing, got to make sure you don't have super weak links because weak links break chains, right? So we got to make sure we have strong links at all times. Number two, part of that sometimes is that effort piece that we dismissed earlier, but look, effort is important. Heart's important. Like that's the baseline to me. That's the price of admission on the court. So if you don't have that, you shouldn't be on the court. And there are definitely players and programs that don't take defense as seriously as they need to. And that's going to always hold your defensive ceiling back. If you have a guy that doesn't value defense the way he should, that's just as big a problem as a guy who gets blown by every time. Because if your defenders are seeing a player hold back because they're saving themselves for the offensive end, how are you ever going to build a great defensive culture? I know year two at New Paltz, we were on a tear. We were top 3% in the country on defense, and we had our best shooters really struggling from three. They were telling us their legs were so sore. They were playing defense so hard. And honestly, they just had to work up their conditioning and their stamina to be able to continue to shoot at a high level and play defense at a high level. But sometimes it's your conditioning that's holding you back. Like maybe your guys can't play the minutes they're playing with the intensity you need them to play on defense and in offense, especially if you're going to be pushing it in transition and sprinting to the corners. And you also want them to be super intense and focused and driven on the defensive end. Tony Bennett used to talk about that at Virginia. Like they exerted so much effort on the defensive end. There's a reason he ran a slower paced offense. There's a reason he walked the ball up and didn't move her blocker because he didn't want a quick shot and then his team would have to defend again. He wanted his guys to be able to almost catch their breath while executing, really detailed and focused action on the offensive end. But, some coaches, they really want to push the pace on offense and do all that stuff. That's great. We do that too. We just need to make sure our players are able to handle that without our standards slipping. So conditioning could be, or effort could be another thing that's holding you back. And then the third thing is just a poor scheme and poor adjustments by the coach. Just like I said earlier, I don't need to spend too much time backtracking, but you need to make sure you're putting your players in position. Sometimes, the way you want to guard ball screen is completely at odds with the rest of your scheme. Like you're a no middle team, you're trying to keep the ball at the middle, but when the wing ball screen comes, you want to force it, funnel it into the screen and hard hedge it. And it's just, sometimes things are really at odds with each other, and you're mad at your guy getting rejected on the ball screen or not staying attached. And really, it's just your scheme putting players in poor positions, or maybe another offensive coach, identified a weakness in your scheme and you weren't prepared for it to adjust. And now it's on you too. Like you're not adjusting quick enough in games to make sure your players aren't just getting hunted and dissected all the time. So I think those are the three things that could really hold your team back: individual effort and conditioning, and then just the scheme and the coaching adjustments.
All right, so I'm gonna tweak this one a little bit because we talked about scouting a little bit earlier, but I want to talk about, I'm gonna go back to something we talked about in defensive traits, is creating that buy-in with your defensive identity, right? You're talking about your stances, the wall ups, and sometimes when they're kind of figuring how to do it, they're not going to have success with it all the time, right? They gotta learn and they gotta do it. And you play good teams, they're gonna score, right? You can do all you want, they're gonna score. You tip your hat, but how do you go about reinforcing those concepts, within the individual and the team aspects, even though maybe on certain occasions they might not have success with it?
Yeah, there's definitely a learning phase, just like in anything that you're teaching or trying to develop a player for. And you don't want to be, listen, I am no by any means a soft coach. You can ask my players for maybe a referral of my coaching style. But yeah, I think, I have to hold myself back from being maybe a little too hard on guys who are just learning. But I think, let's see, developing a team identity. Well, number one, you need to coach. You need to coach and emphasize it and talk about it all the time. Like defense is how we start practice. We do, these toughness drills, and we do these, maybe these cheesy drills to other coaches. But listen, I've gotten in Twitter wars by tweeting out our warm up about how it's defensive focused and we're diving on the floor and taking charges and sliding and doing mirror drills. And some coaches on Twitter are like, that's a waste of time. That's all like, blah, 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 just cheer, basically like a cheerleading routine. But we had a kid come in and watch our practice that we were recruiting. I went over to him right after we finished our warm up, and immediately the first thing he says is, wow, you guys really care about defense here. And all he saw was our warm up. Like, and yeah, is it exactly game transferring and blah, blah, blah? Probably not. But you know what it is? It's culture transferring. And sometimes you need drills that just instill your culture. Like Greg Popovich does a drill with 3-man weave, 5-man weave, 4 out, 5 out. And it's just like this really communication drill and passing drill. That's all it is. And all the coaches can hate on the 3-man weave and the 5-man weave and how it has no game context and how you're not developing any skill. Greg Popovich's not worried about that. He's building the culture of communication and passing, right? Those things are being valued in that drill. So sometimes it's not always about specific game transfer. Sometimes it's about culture transfer. And so, yeah, we do some drills that maybe don't have the game transfer that some coaches want, but they are hopefully a clear indication to our players that defense matters here and we're going to take it extremely seriously. And every time we do film, we are focused and dissecting our defense. And every time that we are doing, we're never skipping a defensive segment in practice. Like we start with vitamins. So, half the group going to me doing defensive breakdown drills, half the group going to offense, then we switch, then we come together for the whole, and then we have different segments as a whole group. But we are never skipping defense. It's something we talk about all the time. And back to your point about maybe a developing defender, in the beginning of the year, it's not going to look great. Like, honestly, our offense progresses a lot quicker than our defense, especially in the preseason. We're focused on how to guard the ball, and they're putting in stagger screens and zoom actions, and it's like, oh my God, like we're not even anywhere near putting in that coverage, right? And so you have to pick, like, what am I focused on the first week of practice? I'm not focused on we can't guard the zoom action the correct way, or we can't guard like why are we guarding the stagger? Like my focus is very narrow because I can only criticize and critique and uphold what I've taught. So week one, I'm very clear. We need to have impact on the ball. We have to have a low man at all times, and we have to have a great containment on the ball. Right? Those are the three things. And everything else could be screwing up on the defensive end. But the moment that guy puts his hands on the ball, that's when the whistle blows. And that's when we need to have some correction. The moment we have a guy lose his low man stance as the person farthest from the ball, that's when the whistle blows. That stagger screen action, that zoom action, that way we guard pick, that's all going to come, and we can piece it together as we go. But I need to make sure that what we've been taught and what we're preaching is being upheld, so that then we can move on to the next stage with a strong foundation. If I'm trying to make sure that we're ready to win a championship in week one, like we're gonna go all over the place. I just need to make sure we have a solid foundation. So you have to be really clear with what you're gonna get on your guys about, and make sure that you've actually taught it, because the worst thing you can do is get on your players for something you haven't taught about and that they don't even know the expectations for.
So second part here, before we get to our last two segments, now you have that identity, right? You have what you want to do. And this might be, we have a lot of high school coaches listen too. So maybe it's more of a high school younger level, right? Because you don't have as much control in theory of who you're bringing in, right?
Yeah.
College level, you're looking at guys who fit your system, can do these things. And girls and whatever. But, how do you kind of go about at a situation like a high school or a youth program of tweaking what you're doing to fit your personnel, but maintaining those core concepts that you want to use?
Yeah, I think every scheme has different cores, like, different movies have different 6-word synopsises. That's a throwback. So our defense, we have 3 core principles. I think every defense needs 3 core principles, whether you're a pack line, whether you're a hard no middle, whether you're a switching team, whether you're a lock left team, or, a zone team. I think you can always distill it down to 3 core principles. And that might change from your personnel from year to year, what scheme you run, but the 3 core principles really shouldn't. And now a lot of coaches might be like, oh, 3 core principles. I know mine. No threes, no layups, and no foul shots. It's like, great, join the club. That's what everyone wants to do, guy. It's like, that is not a core principle. That's not actionable. That's like some hypothetical, like, I don't know, dream. Like, wake up. You need actionable core principles. Like for us, I already talked about it. Like for our system, we're a no middle switching scheme. Our core principles is impact on the ball, no 1-pass threes, and always have a low man. Now, sometimes we can adjust where we are in the gap. We can adjust certain coverages, but very rarely, I think over 3 years, we've only touched those 3 core principles twice in 3 years for specific game situations. But we always have a low man, we always have impact on the ball, and we are never giving up a 1-pass three. And there's only been 2 games in 3 years that we've adjusted those core principles. Those are the core principles. And then once you know those core principles, well, now you know how to adjust your scheme, right? Because let's say you're a pack line team. I was a pack line team in high school for 4 years. I'm trying to remember our 3 core principles, but it was something like no rhythm threes, no baseline, and I forget the third one. But now you have a clear view of, like, you don't have to just go to zone when your team's not doing well on with your man-to-man defense. You have your 3 core principles. You can adjust everything else outside of that. Right. So maybe you have to shift the gaps up a little bit. Maybe we have to change where our low man is in the pack line because that's not one of our core 3 principles, because we're not giving up baseline. So then we can shift that around. Maybe we can shift how we guard a certain action. So once you have your 3 core principles, it makes it clearer for your guys. And those are things you can always get on them or girls about maintaining. And now we can kind of adjust everything else around it. Bill Belichick talks about having a system that is flexible enough to adapt to the opponent, right? You don't want to be locked in. This is the only way we can ever do it. And now we face a team that we can't do it well against and we just lose. No, we need to have a system that is flexible enough to change based on what we need in that game to win it or adjust to our opponents. So those 3 core principles are important. I will say every time I've changed a scheme, like, going from maybe a no middle to a pack line, or going from a no middle team to a switching scheme or something like that, it's not been super at the level I want in year one. Like, it sometimes is an adjustment period. So you have to pick those moments carefully when you're going to completely shift the whole scheme that maybe you've had developed for a couple of years now, and you're like, oh, well, now it's time to be a pack line team. Maybe it is a good time to change and then develop the pack line and then have that for a couple of years with maybe the people you see coming up in your high school program. Maybe you don't have like a super great rim protector, and maybe you need more point of attack and gap centric. Or maybe you have more length and maybe you're like, we need to be more active in the passing lanes. Now, if you've been a pack line team for 3 years and you want to change to a no middle team, you have to understand that's going to be a big adjustment for your players and everything they've learned the last 3 years. So maybe you don't necessarily have to change your whole scheme. just like an offensive coach who specializes in a special, motion offense, maybe they don't have to change their entire offense. They just need to add different pieces to accentuate their strengths and their personnel. So maybe, yeah, we have more adjustments in our pack line to be more aggressive in the gaps and go for more steals with our length, or maybe we switch more in the gaps and things like that. So I hope that answers your question. I feel like I went all over the place with it, but yeah, hopefully.
So as we go into our last two segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's kind of your chance to talk about whatever you want. It can be about yourself or your program, or for you, your books or your family, or turn the tables and ask Todd and I a question. Whatever floats your boat, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I did want to go back to real quick. So quick time out here. I talked about maybe I lean more towards an old school model of coaching where I'm a little bit more hard on the guys, more demanding. I got that from really coaching with Lee DeForce, ex-military guy at Combine Academy. I don't want to and I think defensive coaches usually sway that way. Like they're really usually, the guys who focus on defense on the staff are usually the guys who are losing their temper the most. I think it's important to make sure you're not stuffing out the passion on the defensive end when you're getting on them guys and trying to, uphold the standards and doing it in a way that maybe you lose your temper sometimes. And maybe that is needed. I'm not going to say that's not needed all the time, but praise is a huge part of developing the passion for defense and that buy-in for defense that I don't think I talked about yet on this podcast, on this talk. One of the first books I ever read was about Dean Smith. And one of the things that stuck with me the most was his players always remembered his praise. Like it was a big deal. Like it was a big production at practice. Like, there would be criticisms, there would be critiques, not, and corrections. Corrections is probably a better word that Dean Smith would want you to use. But at the moment that something happened minor, especially minor, that maybe gets overlooked, and same thing with Jay Wright when he was at Villanova, he did this all the time. Bill Belichick, when you watch him break down film, they want to call back to something that maybe went completely unnoticed and make sure that we stop it and we really focus in on this praise because we want this praise to be felt. Earlier in the year, like I'm focused on the impact on the ball, right? I'm making sure we have good heat. We're tracing the ball. We're heating the ball up. And so, okay, we have a great possession. Guy catch the ball on the wing. We have great heat. They're running a cross screen, down screen. We haven't even practiced how to defend the guy coming off the cross screen's wide open, but the guy misses it because he can't see it with the pressure, right? He's faking it. He misses it, the timing just a little bit. So now he has to go to the down screen and we get a deflection on the ball, or maybe we force a bad pass. Now the guy in the passing lane deflects it. Now the guy, on the backside steals the ball off the deflection and we go off and we go score and everyone's excited and everyone's probably supporting the guy who got the deflection or the guy who came up with the ball. And really, I need to stop it there and really run back the play and point out to the entire team, like the reason we're in that opportunity, the reason we got in that moment where we stole the ball and went to go score a transition layup was because this guy right here, the guy guarding the ball, like how was that cross screen? Did we, was that guy open? Yes. Why couldn't we get it to him? Because that heat on the ball, like it all comes back to that. And they need to see that because they want to be the player now that has the whole practice stop to learn about how they impacted the ball properly. And also, it creates that buy-in. Like that wasn't just wasted energy. Like, because the guy heating up the ball, he probably doesn't know behind him the guy's wide open and he just prevented a 2-point layup, right? He just thinks he's doing what's supposed to be done. But now he has that buy-in. Now he knows the impact that he really had on the play, and the other players know the impact he really had on the play. So you have to make sure you're using your praise, not just for how the play ended, right? The guy, great job, Johnny, you got that steal. No, how did we get that steal? Or how did we get that stop? How did we cover up this action? Sometimes, like Bill Belichick, he shows this great run play where the running back makes a great juke and scores the touchdown. He's not focused on that. He's focused on how the guard pulled. He's focused on how the wide receiver blocked the edge, and that allowed the running back to get to the edge. And those are things that the fans don't see. Those are things that maybe even the players who are celebrating the running back don't notice, but he needs to bring it back to that because those are the things, going back to the margins, that really separate wins and losses at the margins and can put your players in position to not only buy in for defense, but make an impact on it. So I think praise is a huge part, and you need to make sure you're praising the things that lead to winning, not just the things that maybe are the end result of it.
All right, so we got last segment here, quick hitters. Just kind of throwing questions at you. Answer as quickly, long as you want. Your favorite current defender to watch, and I'm guessing you probably can't narrow it down to one. That would be my guess.
Well, I'm gonna give so OKC. I love watching OKC. Lou Dort, I think, is really the key engine of that defense. I think he should have won Defensive Player of the Year. So he's one of my favorite defenders to watch. Anytime you turn on OKC, you got a bunch of defenders to watch. So that's a great team to watch. Then I would also say Dyson Daniels. I think he could have also won Defensive Player of the Year. What he's doing, I don't know if you've seen the steals deflection chart, the graph, and he's all the way over here, and everyone else is down there. So he's doing a great job. I broke him down 2 years ago, and now this season was even better than I could ever imagine him getting to. So he's one of my favorite defenders to watch, and he's always looking to get deflections, to get after the ball. So he's fun to watch.
I'm going to tweak this one a little bit. Who's an offensive team you enjoy watching?
Okay, that's a good one. Let's see. Offensively, I really enjoy watching the Pacers. I was actually secretly rooting for the Pacers against OKC, even though, OKC's best team. I just love the transition break that, the Pacers were running. I love the flow of their offense. They seem to have a great motion offense. Rick Carlisle, you can see in the back here, I got a Dallas Mavericks championship banner here. That's from 2011 when they won it with, Rick Carlisle, Dirk, Jason Terry, and Jason Kidd. That was one of, my favorite teams to watch back then. Jason Kidd, too, just a great passer. So I love teams that push the pace like that. I love teams that get in transition, have great flow. I've always loved watching the Warriors. They've been one of my favorite teams to watch. And then I wouldn't say maybe it's necessarily offensive teams that I love watching. There's a lot of offensive actions I love watching. I love watching. I don't know why. I love watching split cuts. I could watch endless, we run split cuts, hit the elbows, like elbow action. That stuff I can't get enough of. So teams that watch that, I love watching that. I love watching Princeton offenses too. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was texting our head coach like all through the playoffs. Like it was just amazing the pace that the Pacers played at. Like it was like relentless.
Yeah.
Like which in turn makes it really hard to defend, right? Like you're always a step out of position. You're not quite where you need to be. And it was just they kept coming and coming and coming. It was kind of crazy how much they got on a roll with that.
And I think every coach should be studying them. I mean, they weren't there because they had the most talent. They certainly didn't have the most talent in the East, but they had a lot of good players. They had a lot of talent, maybe not the highest talent, but they had a lot of talent. And Rick Carlisle and his staff did an amazing job of maximizing that group of guys, maximizing depth. And I think every coach can kind of steal some things from that run.
So you mentioned, when you tore your ACL, you got reading books and doing all this coaching stuff. So I'll tweak it a little bit. Maybe a coach you like learning from the most. It could be on Twitter. It could be books. It could be somebody else that's putting out videos. Whatever, maybe whatever format you like to absorb it. What is some of your coach you like learning from?
Well, on Twitter or X. I still don't call it X naturally, but
I can't either.
It's Twitter.
Yeah, I love watching, half court hoops. He does a great job of putting out sets and stuff like that. I love watching. I think I honestly I don't know if I'll get the name pronunciation right, but I think it's Evan Galberto. He does some great cut-ups of both, individual offensive skills and he does, defensive film too. So he'll like put all of Dyson Daniels' steals together and tweet that out. And so I love watching that kind of stuff. He does a good job of compiling clips from great players and great skill sets. And then honestly, I've been looking a lot into movement development and strength and conditioning coaches on X. So one of the guys I really enjoy when he tweets out, make sure I get his name right. Jerry DeFilippo, maybe. I'm not the best. Yeah, he's great. He's great. He's got a lot of great drills, a lot of great progressions. Books that have really influenced me. And the first book I think I ever ran that wasn't like Wooten's book of coaching, the big giant coaching books. But the first like novel I read was Phil Jackson's 11 Rings. Dean Smith has a great one. Pete Carroll, NFL guy, he has a great book called Win Forever that really shaped how I thought about culture. And then Coach K's Gold Standard I thought was really informative too, and a lot of good business books too. But I think those are enough books and Twitter follows there.
So what are you doing outside of basketball when you're getting away from basketball? What's a hobby?
That's a tough one.
Like, I don't have one of those.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm diving into St. John's film. No, so I try, continue. I love any athletic endeavor, so I also got a dog, so I'm continuing, running and walking him, training him. But, pickleball I'm getting into as well. Any pickup basketball opportunities I'm diving into. Other hobbies, I said I got a master's in psychology while I was here at New Paltz, and I started, teaching some courses. So that's been a lot of fun. That's taken up some time too. So I don't know, that's some good hobbies, maybe some good movies, some cooperative games as well. So yeah.
All right, your favorite sports team outside of basketball?
Well, I don't really enjoy watching baseball. Sorry, Coach. I know you're a baseball guy. I love watching football if I'm not watching basketball. I've really enjoyed some of the great football guys. I love watching, Sean McVay and obviously Andy Reid. But the guy that's really, I idolize, and I know he's had a rough year or maybe a couple of years. But Bill Belichick, I mean, I can't get enough of learning from him and studying his teams. And just the way he adjusts his defense and changes from week to week you know, is very rare to see, especially as a basketball coach, a team that shifts so much and is more of a chameleon than kind of a button down system. And the way he prepares and tries to limit other teams' offenses, I've gotten a lot of insight from reading his books and studying his stuff and just trying to digest as much information as he puts out there. And luckily, he's putting out more information. He just released the book, and he is under a lot of speculation with how his life is turning out in the last year, but he's been a fun guy to learn from, at least, not personally, but, maybe one day, hopefully.
And then last one, maybe what's a new concept you haven't really installed with your team? You're just kind of looking at studying.
Well, I've gone through stints of being a press coach throughout my career. Early on studying Billy Donovan and Shaka Smart, implementing their kind of presses. Then at Hofstra, we did more zone presses. Stole stuff from Jay Wright and stuff like that. This year, well, I don't want to give away too much, but I've definitely been diving into pressing a little bit more of the Pitino style of pressing though this time, and I really, I feel pretty solid in the half court now. I need to, learn all the nuances and pick up different things when it comes to pressing and adjusting your press and things like that, especially when you're a baseline man-to-man team, baseline man-to-man press.
Well, Coach, thank you so much today for joining us. I was taking notes throughout the episode. I joked with Todd. I'm like, I think I'm going to go back and listen to this and put more notes in my phone. But I know our guests will appreciate it and learn a lot. So thank you for your time today.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Podcasts was, I didn't mention it earlier, but that was one of the main avenues I did, went to learn as well as a young coach. And so I'm always happy to jump on, have basketball conversations and maybe help, a future coach coming up or maybe, anyone. It's just sharing the game, right? Just sharing the game, what we're learning.